Consider the air in your room right now. It seems still, perhaps a few motes of dust dancing in a sunbeam. It's the most mundane, overlooked substance. We clean it, we ignore it, we never give it a second thought. But what if that indifference was the perfect camouflage? What if, within that seemingly inert cloud, floated thousands of microscopic robots, each a self-contained spy, silently monitoring your every word, your every action, your most private moments? This is not a prologue to a science fiction novel. This is the logical and terrifying endpoint of a project that began over 2 decades ago with the best of scientific intentions. This is the promise and the profound peril of a technology known as smart dust. It represents the absolute erosion of privacy, the final dissolution of the boundary between public and personal space. Your greatest secrets would no longer be safe behind closed doors. They would be betrayed by the very air you breathe. Today we will delve deep into the world of microscopic surveillance. We will explore its origins in prestigious universities, break down the staggering science that makes it possible, investigate just how close it is to reality, and confront the monumental ethical and societal crises it threatens to unleash. This is an investigation into a future where espionage is no longer a device planted in your lamp, but a silent, invisible mist that settles all around you. The story of smart dust begins not in a shadowy intelligence agency, but in the open academic halls of the University of California, Berkeley. In the late 1990s, a brilliant electrical engineer and computer scientist named Professor Chris Pister envisioned a future of ubiquitous sensing. His vision, funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, was initially one of scientific wonder and practical benefit. The core idea was to create a network of tiny wireless sensor nodes, or motes, that could monitor environments with a precision and scale never before imagined. Think of it as a synthetic nervous system for the physical world. The proposed applications were revolutionary. Imagine deploying a cloud of thousands of these sensors from a plane over a redwood forest to monitor microclimates, track animal migration with unimaginable detail, and detect the first whisper of a forest fire long before it became a raging inferno. Imagine embedding these motes into the concrete of bridges, skyscrapers, and tunnels, creating a continuous health monitor for our infrastructure. They could sense stress, strain, and metal fatigue, alerting us to critical weaknesses years before a catastrophic failure, potentially saving thousands of lives. For the military, the appeal was immediate and obvious. Smart dust could be scattered over a battlefield to detect enemy troop movements, identify the presence of chemical or biological agents, or act as a remote, undetectable communication relay for special forces. The fundamental unit of this system, the mote, was conceived as a complete, autonomous system on a chip. But to move from concept to reality, Professor Pister's team, and other researchers like Professor Michael Saylor's group at UC San Diego working on chemical sensing dust, had to solve 4 monumental engineering challenges: sensing, processing, communication, and power. This wasn't just about making things small. It was about redefining the limits of integrated circuitry and wireless technology. To understand the threat, we must understand the device. So let's deconstruct a hypothetical advanced mode of smart dust. Each one is a masterpiece of microelectrical-mechanical systems, or MEMS, engineering. First and foremost are the sensors. This is the collective eye and ear of the device. Depending on its purpose, a mote could be equipped with microscale sensors for temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. It could have a tiny light sensor to detect whether a room is lit or dark, or even to measure the specific light patterns from a computer screen. It could incorporate a microscopic microphone, a MEMS device not unlike the one in your smartphone but far smaller, capable of capturing clear audio. For more advanced spying, it could include a magnetometer to detect changes in magnetic fields caused by electronic devices, or even chemical sensors tuned to detect specific explosives, drugs, or biological compounds. Second is the microcontroller. The raw data from the sensors is useless noise without a brain to process it. This requires a microscopic, ultra-low-power computer chip. This microcontroller's job is to filter out irrelevant data, perform initial analysis, and, most importantly, decide what information is valuable enough to warrant the energy expenditure of transmission. It might be programmed to only activate when it hears a specific keyword, detects a particular person's voice print, or senses movement during hours when the room should be empty. Third is the communication system. This is perhaps the most ingenious part. How does something the size of a grain of sand send a signal over any meaningful distance? The answer lies in two potential methods, both explored in the early research. The first is radio frequency, RF, transmission, essentially a microscopic, incredibly low-power radio. The second, more futuristic method involved optical communication using miniature corner cube retroreflectors. This means the device wouldn't broadcast its own signal. Instead, a central base station would shoot a laser at it, and the mote would modulate the reflection of that laser to send its data back. This is incredibly power efficient. But the real key to communication is the concept of a mesh network. Individual motes can't transmit far. But if you have a cloud of them, they can act as a relay team. Data hops from one mote to another, pass through the air until it finally reaches a more powerful base station receiver, which could be hidden in a car parked outside, a briefcase in a nearby cafe, or a compromised IoT device like a smart thermostat within the target's own home. Fourth, and most critically, is power. This is the greatest constraint. A battery large enough to be useful would be too large. The solution is energy harvesting. Motes are designed to be parasites on the ambient energy of their environment. This is achieved primarily through microscopic solar cells, so even light from a lamp could provide power. Even more cleverly, they can use piezoelectric materials to harvest energy from ambient vibrations, sound waves, footsteps, the rumble of a ventilation system, or even the minute vibrations in a window pane from traffic outside. A mote could spend days or weeks in a low-power sleep mode, harvesting tiny amounts of energy, only waking up for a millisecond to take a sensor reading or to relay a packet of data when it has enough charge. This self-contained autonomy is what makes smart dust such a formidable concept. It doesn't need to be planted perfectly. It just needs to get near the target area. The air currents will do the rest. Let's move from theory to a tangible and terrifying scenario. How would smart dust actually be used for espionage? The year is ambiguous. Perhaps 5, 10, or 15 years from now. A foreign intelligence agency has a high-value target. A diplomat, a CEO, or a defense scientist. Deployment is alarmingly simple. An agent doesn't need to break in. They could simply walk or drive past the target's building at night. From a device disguised as an asthma inhaler or a small compressed air canister, they release a fine, invisible mist containing millions of microscopic motes. Carried by the wind and air currents, these motes infiltrate the building through ventilation shafts, slightly open windows, or under doors. Inside the target's office or home, the motes slowly settle. They come to rest on bookshelves, on the frames of paintings, on the leaves of houseplants, and in the fibers of the carpet. They are now part of the environment. Their solar cells begin harvesting energy from the ambient light. Their vibration harvesters soak up the energy from footsteps and distant sounds. Now the surveillance begins. A network of these motes can paint an incredibly detailed picture. Their microphones can capture every word of a private conversation. Their light sensors can detect when a computer monitor is turned on and could even, in theory, use sophisticated algorithms to read keystrokes by interpreting the faint reflections of fingers on keys, a technique already demonstrated in research labs. Their magnetic sensors can log the comings and goings of electronic devices. Their chemical sensors could sniff for the residue of explosives or specific documents. The data is silently collated within the mesh network. It identifies the most valuable information and begins its journey, hopping from mote to mote until it reaches the base station receiver a block away. From there, the data is encrypted and bounced off a satellite or through the internet to a command center on the other side of the world. The entire process is passive, silent, and virtually undetectable to any conventional bug-sweeping equipment, which is designed to find powered radio transmitters, not sporadically active microscopic nodes. This all sounds like the plot of a techno-thriller, so we must ask the critical question. Is this technology real, or is it still theoretical? The answer lies in a spectrum of development. The monolithic single-piece mote, as envisioned in the 1990s, has largely evolved. The field is now more accurately described as the world of advanced microelectromechanical systems, MEMS, and the Internet of Things, IoT. The core functionalities have been proven, commercialized, and miniaturized to a startling degree. We already carry the components in our pockets. The accelerometer and gyroscope in your smartphone that tell it which way is up. Those are MEMS devices. The microphone that you speak into. MEMS device. The research has not been abandoned. It has been distributed and refined. Furthermore, defense and intelligence agencies worldwide have undoubtedly poured vast resources into this field. DARPA, for instance, has run programs like SHIELD, which aim to develop microscopic chips for tracking the authenticity of microelectronics. This proves the capability to create and track tiny wireless chips exists. In academia, progress continues. A team at the University of Michigan created the Michigan Micromote, or M3, which they claimed was the world's smallest computer at around a cubic millimeter. Could sense temperature, take pictures, and transmit data wirelessly. So, is a full-blown multi-sensor smart dust cloud currently floating in your home? For the average person, almost certainly not. The challenges of mass production, reliable deployment, and long-term networking are still significant. However, to assume that a state-level actor with virtually unlimited resources hasn't already developed and deployed a targeted, perhaps slightly larger-scale version of this technology against high-value targets would be naive. We are likely in the era of capability, not yet commoditization. The science is sound, the patents exist, and the motivation is undeniable. The bridge from science fiction to science fact is not one we will cross in a single leap, but one we are already stepping onto. The technological achievement, however staggering, pales in comparison to the ethical and societal catastrophe that smart dust represents. It forces us to confront questions for which we have no answers. The most fundamental casualty is privacy. The concept of a private space, a sanctuary where one can think, speak, and act without observation, is completely obliterated. The Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable search and seizure becomes meaningless. How does one get a warrant to search dust? How would you even know you were being searched? The potential for abuse is infinite. Totalitarian state control, corporate espionage on an unprecedented scale, industrial sabotage, and the nightmare of sophisticated stalking and blackmail. This leads to the death of trust and free association. If you cannot be certain your meeting room, your home, or even a public park is free of invisible monitors, how can whistleblowers, journalists, political dissidents, or even just competing businesses operate? It creates a chilling effect that stifles innovation, free speech, and political dissent at its core. Then comes the problem of defense. How do you defend against an enemy you cannot see, hear, or detect? Traditional counter-surveillance sweeps. For bugs, look for radio frequency transmissions. But a smart dust mote that only transmits for milliseconds a day, using ultra-low power protocols, or uses passive optical communication, would be virtually invisible to these tools. The only definitive countermeasures are extreme. Sealing a room in a Faraday cage, employing industrial-grade HEPA filtration systems running 24/7 to scrub the air, or using powerful electromagnetic pulses to fry all electronics, which would also destroy your own devices. These are not solutions for a home or an office. They are protocols for a military bunker. This means the real defense must be legal and political, not technical. We need new laws created now that explicitly define the malicious deployment of environmental microsensors as a severe crime. We need international treaties that treat the development and use of such pervasive surveillance tools with the same seriousness as chemical or biological weapons. We need a robust public conversation about the boundaries of technology before those boundaries are erased without our consent. Smart dust presents us with a stark dichotomy, a choice between two profoundly different futures. One path leads to a world of incredible wonder and connection, a world where we understand our natural environment with intimate precision, where our cities are intelligent and self-monitoring, and where our personal health is tracked proactively and preventatively. It is a future built on the optimistic promise of ubiquitous sensing. The other path leads to a panopticon, a prison without walls where the very air is an warden. It is a future of absolute control, paranoia, and the death of private thought. It is the ultimate tool of the surveillance state and the predator. The technology itself is neutral. It is a tool. But it is perhaps the most powerful and insidious tool ever conceived. The choice between these futures is not made in a single moment, but through the policies we advocate for, the ethics we demand from our technologists and leaders, and the value we continue to place on the human right to a private life. The story of smart dust is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that the most profound threats are not always the ones we can see coming. Sometimes they are already in the room, floating silently in the light, waiting for us to notice. The question is, will we look up in time?